My name is Rogan Cunningham, and today I'm going to go over 5 tips that I wish I knew when I was starting archery. So I'm going to go over what the mistakes were that I made, and then I'm going to teach you how to correct them and give you good and bad examples. So the first tip I'm going to go over is grip placement on your bow arm. Alright, I see a lot of guys at the start, usually they get out of it, but some guys don't. So it's gripping your bow. Usually what people do is they get the bow and they want to grip it really, really tight. And this is fine when you're first getting into archery. But as time goes on, you'll find that when you do grip it like that, and some people call it a death grip, I like to think of it as you're gripping your bow like you would like a pistol or something. So you can see tension in my fingers and they're really wrapped around the grip. So what that does is it adds torque into your shot, either left or right? So when you start getting a little bit better, you'll notice you might have left and right misses, and that could be why. So to get good grip placement, essentially what you need to do is not really grip the bow very tight. Think about it. If you don't have any, massive amounts of tension in your hand when you're gripping the bow, you can't torque it. So what I like to have is not a lot of tension on any of my fingers or my thumb. But what I'm doing is, let's pretend this is the stock of my bow. Alright? What I do is, I come in, right, and I squeeze my thumb and my index together. So what that does is, it allows for not a lot of movement left and right, but I'm not actually gripping the bow. I'm just using tension. I'm squeezing with my thumb and my index together. And that helps it stay a little bit more rigid. So what it looks like is this, right? Now obviously I've got 3 more fingers here. So what I do is with my middle finger, I just gently put it on the front there, alright? And it's not like gripping it, it's just kind of floating there because that's where it likes to be. And then I kind of have my ring finger and pinky finger just kind of floating out to the side at like 45 degrees angles. Now, archery is very individual, so if you find that something else works for you, go right ahead. But what I am saying is that like gripping the bow super tight can be bad for you. Right, the next tip I want to talk about is finger placement on your release. Now, I started out on a trigger release, right? So now I have some words to say about this on the Hinge as well, and I'll explain that afterwards. But what I really didn't know at the time was if I position my fingers in a different position on my release aid, it could give a completely different feel to your trigger. So I'll give you an example. I'm not sure what tension that trigger is set to, so I won't actually fire it yet. But you see here it's kind of neutral, right? Now I could put more pressure on my ring finger, and it could give a different feel where my thumb barrel is, right? Or I could put more pressure on my index, and again, it could give a completely different feel where my thumb barrel is. What it also does is, when your release aid is canted more that way, now I'm exaggerating there, but when you have more pressure on your ring finger, right, it makes your trigger more sensitive. So if you wanted your trigger to go faster, but you didn't want to play around with the tension of your release aid, you could try count your release aid just a little bit with your ring finger, and then vice versa, put more pressure on your index, makes it slower. So it gives 2 different completely feels to a release aid. Now, relating that to Hinge, well, you know, you can't your release aid one way or the other, because with a Hinge release, that's what sets it off. So, when I talk about finger placement, what I can say is you should have your fingers like curled around your release aid. Now, I find what happens is when I don't curl my fingers, I could be up at full draw for ages and the shot just won't go. And I feel like I've built a lot of tension, but the shot just won't go. And that is because the release aid is like there on my fingers. And so I don't have enough grip on my fingers to make the shot happen. So if I just curl my fingers down like that, it makes that a lot quicker. Now again, if you wanted your shot to be a lot quicker, curl your fingers. If you don't want your shot to be quicker, then don't curl your fingers. So I'll curl my fingers here. So when I get to full draw here, I'll let my fingers relax, and we'll see how long it takes. So I don't usually shoot intentionally with my fingers like right on the edge, but sometimes what happens when I'm shooting for a long time, I'll probably start my process, rotate, and my fingers will slip, and then I won't have any more grip on my fingers to make the shot happen. So something to be mindful of, something I wish I knew when I started using the Hinge and when I started using my trigger. Here's a very basic but very, very important one, okay? It's called reference points. So quite simply, what a reference point is when you draw up, it's what part of the string touches what part of your face. And I'll get into all of the specific details of that. So probably on your first day of your archery lesson, you were taught how to anchor or what an anchor is. And literally, because I started on a recurve, anchor was get your hand in here and make sure the string touches your nose. And that's all it was. On compound, there is one or two more elements going in to compound. So, there's a couple of different ones. The first one is your release aid. Where your release aid sits on your face. What I like to do is, between my jawline, I like to have my two knuckles. So my jawline will sit in between these two knuckles here. Just right there. So that's how I know that my hand is in the same spot every single time. Alright? Then, the way I've set up my Super Focus XL, I have the peep run a little bit higher. And what that does is, it makes me turn my face just a little bit more. So what it does is, my hand comes in, knuckles between the jawline, the string runs on the side of my lip here where my finger does. Alright? Usually, you'll set up a compound to run the string on the side of your lip here. But you can totally run it here if you want. And I've seen some guys run it like in the middle of their lips. Like there. Which is a bit of extreme, but you can do it. So, you've got your hand with your release aid, and then your string coming up through the corner of your lip or the side of your lip. The next one is string touching your nose. So going from the lip to the nose. So the string just barely touches your nose and runs down. And then, what the last thing is, your peep. Does your peep line up with your eyes? So to break that down even more, I'll just walk you through it when I draw. Alright. So I draw up. Right? I'm not at anchor yet. I put my knuckle between my jawline. I have my lips on the side of my lips to the string. Then the string to my nose. And then the peep is just automatically lined up. Now, I say automatically lined up. When you set it up, it may not be perfect. But what I use the peep for is to sort of bulletproof that this is right, and this is right. And when all of them are right, then I know my peep should be just bang on, like straight in the middle. What I do with my nose is, and you might see me when I'm drawing up, I come into anchor, put my hand in, I sort of twist my face slightly. And the reason for that is, I'm not running the string on the tip of my nose, I'm running it on the side of my nose. So what I do is, by doing that, I'm like turning my face into the string. So instead of having it here, I'm having it here. You can see how both are slightly different. I'm exaggerating here. So again, that's the beauty of archery. You can pick and choose, but those couple of things are really good to remember and really try to nail them, because, you know, it is one of the basics of archery, but if you nail it, you will see some improvement. So the next tip has to do with bracing against your bow. Now, what that literally means is pushing against your bow. Brace is just another word for it, right? So probably in your beginner's course, if you did one, maybe you didn't, they would have to just kind of hold the bow and then pull back, let go. Something else you can do to also make your shot faster if you wanted, but for me, it helps me aim much better, is bracing against the bow. Now, it's going to be hard for me to show you, but if I describe it good enough and some of you go away and try it, should work. So when I draw back, my bow arm right now isn't actually doing anything. It's kind of just sitting there. It's just holding the bow. Alright. And I can see that I'm kind of wobbling around in the 9 ring. But when I get back to full draw and I keep my brace against the bow, it'll help me aim a lot better. So when I draw back, I'm keeping a little bit of a constant push with my bow arm. It just helps me stay that much steadier, that instead of bobbing all around the 9 ring, I'm bobbing in kind of half the 9 ring into the 10 ring, right? So just pushing against your bow, it'll make your aiming process just that much easier. At least that's how it was for me. And that wasn't something I discovered a long time ago. That was something I discovered quite recently. Especially with a trigger, right? It can make your shot a hell of a lot faster. Because in these bows, right, when you draw back and you get to your back wall, right, there's a little bit of play in it. Like, there's no back wall that, like, you hit it and, like, that's it. So when you're bracing against the bow, right, once you hit that back wall and you brace against the bow, that little bit of movement that would have been your back wall that you would have had to done with expanding to get rid of that little bit of movement in your back wall is now gone. So you're actually making your shot faster by getting to the actual back wall. Alright? So, in a nutshell, when you brace against the bow, your shot for back tension is going to be faster because you're limiting yourself the amount of back wall room that you have to play with. That can be good or it can be bad for you. If you like a bit of a longer shot, well then, just set your trigger up heavier then. But definitely try keep your brace against the bow. It helped me aim so much better. The fifth and final tip that I can give you for starting out compound archery. This was probably the biggest game changer for me all time. Was back tension instead of command shooting, right? So what command shooting is quite simply choosing exactly when you're going to take a shot with your trigger. So when you draw back and you come around, you don't even have to be punching it, right? And I'll talk about that in a second. But you can come around and you can put your thumb on the barrel without punching it, and you decide exactly when your shot is going to go off by either one, like actually physically hitting the trigger, which is punching, or two, something that I use in the wind is I call it like controlled punching. I don't know if it has an actual name, but what I do is I put my thumb on the barrel and I choose when I'm going to shoot by really like pushing hard with my back arm, right? So I do that in the wind because back tension is quite simply not knowing when you're going to fire, but it's very repeatable. And I know that on paper probably doesn't make sense, but when you actually go out and you try it for a month, because that's what it definitely takes. It takes a lot of discipline. But when you go out and you try it and you do get the hang of it, it does produce really good results. So, what punching is, and usually guys will punch their trigger because of target panic, which is another completely different topic. So literally what target panic and punching have in common is an archer can be scared to aim in the middle because they want their shot to fire when their pin is right in the 10. So as soon as their pin goes in the 10, they like hammer their trigger. So when you do that whole hammering thing, right? Yeah, you might produce some good results, but long term, you're not going to get very far. I know some bow hunters do this, but it's just not good for you. So, what you should try do is, you should try put your thumb on the barrel without actually firing it. And I would say, and this is how I got over my target panic, is I put my thumb on the barrel, right? And sometimes I connected my index finger to my thumb, and like the barrel would be in between my index and my thumb. And so all I had to do was put my index and my thumb together, and my thumb would also be on the barrel, if that makes sense. So how I got over my target panic was put my thumb on the barrel and I did controlled punching, right? Where I would wait for a couple seconds but be resting my thumb on the barrel and then allowing myself to aim in the 10 without actually firing it. And then when the pin was settled, I just pulled through. Then I decided that it was time to make the jump to actual back tension. So what back tension is quite literally putting your thumb on the barrel, just like I was before, except this time it was a gradual buildup of tension when you don't actually know when it's going to fire. So what that is a little bit of pushing, a little bit of pulling, and like possibly a little bit of elbow movement coming back. But that's a subset of pulling. So what you need to do is you need to make sure that your pin stays relatively in the middle. You can't be, okay, yeah, I'm aiming the 10, let's divert all my focus to expanding now. Because then when your shot is just about to go, suddenly you're aiming in the bottom left of the target. And then your shot goes, you miss, and you're like, why did that happen? So if you can get it to a subconscious effort, that helps a lot. It's going to take a while. This is the thing that took the longest out of this list, but it's definitely the best one to do, to master, to at least try. If you're not used to like a surprise release, and you're scared of your trigger because you've been punching it for like so long now, and you don't know what else to do with it, buy a hinge, or at least get a friend to loan you a hinge. You know, some guys call it a true back tension release. But what it is simply you put more pressure on your index than all your other fingers, and it fires through this rotating motion, right? So the more pressure I put on my ring finger and my middle finger, the more likely it is to go. So I know when I'm at full draw, the amount of pressure I need to put on my ring and my index, or my ring and my middle finger, for it to fire. So what that does is simply there is no way to cheat with this. Alright? So if you want to learn back tension on a trigger, go get yourself a hinge, because you will then be mentally disciplined to, this shot has to be surprise. You know, it has to be. Like, there is no other way to do it. Like, it's going to be a surprise every single time. You know? So you just gotta make sure that your pin stays in the middle. So that is how I would mentally prepare yourself to go and shoot back tension with a trigger. You can have it set pretty light if you wanted to, but the main points here are thumb resting on the barrel, not actually hitting it, right? So thumb resting on the barrel, and then just a gradual buildup of tension between pushing and pulling. You will get frustrated, because I did. I think any person who's trying to learn back tension would get frustrated, but that's just part of it. It was the biggest game changer for me, so it might be for you. So that's about it. Those are all the tips I have. I have more. If you want to see more, be sure to let me know down in the comments. You should subscribe. I'm trying to put out more videos. Mean a lot if you did subscribe. And be sure to like the video as well. So, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.